For proper test planning, you have to consider a lot of things. Those are the dimensions of test planning. Starting with clarifying what to test. So the test object sometimes is very clear, but sometimes it's not. So it's important to have the knowledge which component or feature is under test and to specify it for the planning process. Then you also should have the context of this test. So are you testing a feature for the first time, or are there certain changes? If so, which changes? Or you're just testing a bug fix or do some regression tests. So that's very important so that you can plan accordingly. Also, you need to know the specific version of the test object or the variant so that you can consider this for the planning process. And at the same time, it's also important to outline what not to test. So those are the thoughts you have to make about what is in scope and out of scope. Next is the answer to the question where to test. So here you have to think about the test infrastructure and plan accordingly. So sometimes you have to do tests with simulation or a certain test bench, or you use a specific or any browser for your software. So those are considerations about also test tooling and the infrastructure that you use. And the test environment, here you could have the production or the test environment that is used for specific tests. Then how to test, that's all about the test specification, starting with test cases. So depending of what and where to test, you select specific test cases to fulfill the test purpose. Those test cases can also come in a bunch of test cases called test sets. You may also add additional information called test instructions. So those may be certain information to be considered only for a specific test execution. And also there may be tests that are executed by a test automation, and there may be specific test cases for that. Also, it is important to define who is going to test. This may be a specific individual, so a person of the test team that has a deep knowledge about this topic, or it may be also assigned to a self-organized team that is then picking, depending on availability, who is going to execute those tests. And again, when it comes to automation, then tests are assigned to the automation team or directly to the automated system. And when to test refers to any timeline constraints, or especially the start and end date of a test execution. And those points are the most important ones that should be considered for any test planning. Of course, sometimes there can be additional ones, and in a project there may be also personal interests that are then considered during the test planning. Other aspects that are important for the test planning process are the test order. It may be necessary to prioritize certain tests. That can be test trigger, test types, or test cases. If, for example, an urgent test trigger comes up, it potentially has to be tested right now and other activities has to be postponed. It also makes sense to do a smoke test for a new major release first to quickly and in an efficient way find if some major features are broken or if the feature is working in general. And within a set of planned test cases, it also makes sense to order them strategically. So in general, it makes sense to test from general or major features to specific or minor features. And after that, test corner use cases, error use cases, etc. Because in the end, nobody's happy if you find 5 errors in edge cases while the login of the web page is not working at all. And from a practical point of view, the test order should be reflected in the test execution plan so that the test cases are then executed from top to bottom. Limited resources can be that the test team or the test infrastructure resources are lower than what you would need ideally. The test team may be limited in a way that specific people with skills are not available, or that there's no capacity anymore within the test team in a specific time frame. At the same time, it could be that there is also no capacity at the test infrastructure. And those resource limitations, if possible, should be taken into account during the test planning process so that maybe the amount of test cases or the timeline is adapted. And lastly, the product variants. So it may be that the product has more than one variant, which adds additional complexity to the testing in general, but also the test planning process. And there you might have to identify a reference variant or the most important and relevant variants that are then tested.